Who ranked first this year?
Ranked first, we had a tie between the United States and Hong Kong. This is the first time we've ever had two nations to be so close together. And then we have Singapore in third place. And though we call it kind of the winning trio, it's a very much a fast photo finish.
So it's more or less the same countries each year?
Yes. And this
First,
is showing,
second, third.
Yes, this is showing that the long-term perspective is so very important, because when you have short-term gains or losses, you want to try and remedy those. But really, competitiveness is about long-term prosperity. So we're looking at the sustainability of competitiveness. And those three nations are showing that you can have some short-term problems. Of course, when we're looking at the debt situation, the fiscal imbalances in the United States, and people are questioning, well, how can the United States be so competitive?
Yeah.
It's because we're seeing a growing gap between the efficiency of the business sector and the efficiency of the government sector. So America is still competitive despite, if I could say, the lack of efficiency of the government sector. You know, the businesses are still thriving, there's a lot of liquidity, they're still highly innovative. We're facing bigger challenges as far as unemployment goes. I think this is going to be the critical challenge for the United States to be addressing in the near future.
Mm-hmm. But the creativity is still there.
Yes, there's a high degree of innovation, a high degree of creativity, a lot of entrepreneurship as well. So, you know, the backbone of American industry is very much the small and medium-sized industries. And I think we'll be facing probably some reindustrialization in the United States, a comeback of manufacturing, a comeback of industry, the need to make concrete things again and not relying just on services and on innovation. So I think we're going to see a rebound in exports in the United States, a rebound of some of the outsourcing coming back into the United States, core technology staying in the United States. And in fact, if you look at trade and commerce, in fact, a lot of the imports coming into the United States are American products because of the American components. So even many of the exports that were coming from China into the United States are being made by American companies in China. So it's very difficult now to actually say what is the country of origin of a lot of these products.
But you said that they will focus more on manufacturing.
Yes, I think we're going to see a reindustrialization in many of the countries like the United States and in Europe as well. The need to come back to the source, that you cannot thrive just on services, on tourism, on construction, and on real estate. You know, we've seen what that has brought us to as far as the economic crisis and the recession, that we need to create more jobs by building up the manufacturing base.
What about Hong Kong?
Well, which is interesting in competitiveness, is you have the two countries that are tied are the most diverse economies.
They're totally different.
Oh yes, you're talking one of the largest economies in the world,
and another small island,
and a small administrative region of China. So it shows that competitiveness is not just one model. You can have many different recipes for success, and I think that's very interesting for people to pick up on, because each country will have its advantages and its disadvantages, its indicators for attractiveness. So in the United States you have a very, very large domestic economy, but Hong Kong you have a very small economy, but it's the gateway to China. So in fact there are some similarities there. You have a very strong financial sector in the United States, also in Hong Kong. Very, very strong emphasis on services and on high degree of innovation as well. Hong Kong and Singapore are very interesting because they're two similar cases and yet can be very, very diverse. I think in the long run, maybe Hong Kong becomes more and more dependent on the competitiveness of China, where Singapore may have a long-term sustainability which will be advantageous for Singapore in the fact of a lot more biotechnology, a lot more innovative activities, moving up the value chain, advantages, of course, in the financial sector and in services as well. And I often think of Singapore as kind of the Switzerland of Asia.
Is there any interesting trend that you find in this year's survey?
Yes, I think we're seeing that there's more and more concerns about the sustainability of competitiveness. So this is looking at environmental concerns. It's also looking at the possibility of maintaining exports in a very difficult external environment. So if we're looking particularly at Thailand, I think there are three major concerns. Can exports continue to be so strong in an environment where external demand is falling? If we're going into a double-dip recession, does that mean that a lot of our export bases are going to start to be depressed again? So this is very much a concern to the Thai manufacturers. The second is how do you deal with the volatility in the currency, with the appreciation of the baht that's making exports, of course, much more expensive and making competition more difficult. And then thirdly, you also have the problems of rising cost of doing business. You know, commodity prices are rising. Thailand is very dependent on its energy imports, so that's making it more expensive for utilities and electricity and oil. But also, you know, labor costs are probably going to start rising as well. I think for the large global companies, this is not a big problem. It may be problematic for the small family businesses and the small and medium-sized companies in Thailand, you know, where all of a sudden it's becoming more complex to do business, it's becoming more costly, and this is going to make, I think, the sustainability of their businesses much more difficult.
Mm-hmm. For countries like the US or Hong Kong or Singapore, or say the top 5, do they have very strong education system? Is that like one of the major key?
Yes, but very diverse. I would say the United States is, of course, very well known for its tertiary education. It has some of the most reputable universities in the world, and yet we have a very dysfunctional primary and secondary school system. Okay, it's very much non-serving the future interests of the economy. And what I think is very problematic in the United States is we're seeing a growing gap between the needs of the business community and what the educational system is offering. There's a skills gap, and yet at the same time we have rising unemployment, around 9% in the United States, which is something we haven't seen for many, many years. And yet at the same time, the companies are not finding the skills that they're needing. So I think the United States needs to change its mindset to going back to basics. In primary school, there's been too many, maybe too much desire to give a well-rounded education to children with many, a lot of emphasis in the arts and a lot of emphasis in fun.
Sports
yes. Well, sports and arts are very important as a base, but they can also be developed outside of the educational system. I think we need to really think about getting back to the maths and the reading and the basic skills.
Go back to the books.
Go back to the ABCs, as we say, but at the same time developing more vocational skills. I think there's been a lack of emphasis on technical skills, vocational skills, IT skills, and that is really what is missing if we want to start reindustrialization and if we want to bring manufacturing back. A lot of people say, what are they going to come back to if there's no jobs and there's no competencies? So I think we need to build those competencies back into our educational system. And that could be maybe creating a niche of community colleges that are working in partnership with the business community, trying to understand what are the business's needs and trying better to meet those needs. And this hopefully will start closing the gap with the unemployment, and especially the long-term unemployment. People that have been out of work in the United States for about 6 to 8 months now, that level of unemployment is growing wider and wider. And this is a big concern, because how do you retrain those people to the necessary competencies of today's challenging world?
Does Hong Kong have the same problem as well?
Hong Kong, I don't think so, not so much. I think Singapore also excels very much in education. Hong Kong, it's finding its way. Still, I'm not very familiar with the educational system of Hong Kong, but I think it has a very good reputation as far as its tertiary education as well. Singapore is more equal across all of the bases of education, from primary to secondary to tertiary, and comes up with some of the best ranks in the international scores like PISA and some others as well. Even though Shanghai came out #1 this year for the first time, which is very, very impressive. But again, this is the problem we have with China. It's not one economy. You have the East Coast and then you have the inland provinces, and there's a huge dichotomy between the competitiveness of the urban environment and the competitiveness of the rural environment in China. So it's very difficult. There's many countries built into one, and many different degrees of competitiveness.
Within the country.
Within the country, yes. You have some regions in the east coast of China, if you look at Shanghai, for example, that is much richer than some of the regions in the UK. Yes, so there's, I think we need to start paying more attention also to regional competitiveness.
So how do you judge China in the survey? You still take the whole country?
Yes, we still take the whole country, obviously, but it's also a contribution of the industries sector to the GDP of the country. So if it's going to be much more state-owned enterprises, then we'll be having more surveys coming back from those countries. So it's, what we're trying to do is map the country according to the contribution to GDP, and that should be reflected in the survey. But in fact, we usually don't like to talk too much about the report being a survey per se, because really it's only 1/3 survey. The rest is based on statistical analysis, which represents 2/3.